What is up, everyone? I just wanted to take the opportunity here to talk a little bit more about Ryan's £100 plus weight loss journey. Now, this is only partway through this journey for Ryan. Like we're still working together. We're still continuing to push towards more and more and more loss. But we're at the point where I think it was just a really nice milestone to hit that £100 weight loss number, where I really wanted to take the opportunity just to talk you guys through what it takes to achieve a change like that. Because I think one of the first things that I would certainly say is that it can actually be quite difficult to envisage that change, because if you've been at a particular weight for a significant amount of time, and even if you've not been at that weight, maybe maybe your weight's been creeping up, maybe it's been hovering between a certain range, but at a point where you are carrying a huge amount of excess body weight, even trying to wrap your head around what you might look like, feel like, what life might be like at 100, 150, however much you've got to lose, what life might look like at that point can be quite daunting. It can be daunting for you, but it can also be one of those strange things that other people can find quite difficult to deal with as well. Because again, if you've been at a particular point, at a particular weight size for a decent length of time, those around you get quite used to that being you. And so at different points through the journey where you are losing weight, you are making progress, you're probably going to come across comments that they can be well-meaning, but sometimes they can be taken out of context. And I'll touch on that a little bit more as we go, because there are various things, like Ryan's come across some of these comments as he's gone. But the first thing I wanted to do was just talk you through really the process that we've been through to get to where we're at. So you'll have seen the pictures here, like the difference between Ryan at 360 pounds, which is where we began, to where we're at now at just below 260 pounds. We're at a point where we're just over 100 pounds of weight loss. That doesn't happen overnight. This has taken about 11 months. And I also think that's an important thing to realize. Like someone hasn't gained 100, 150 pounds in a few months, and you're certainly not going to lose it in that time too. So one of the first things that I was very open and honest with Ryan when we had our initial conversation was that this is going to take time. And he was very, very, very receptive to that. Like he fully understood and appreciated that it wasn't something that he wanted to rush. It was something that he wanted to take his time with. He wanted it to move quickly, don't get me wrong. Like it wasn't something that we wanted to drag out over a 5-year period, but he was very comfortable in the fact that he wanted to lose weight the right way. He tried lots of other things before that had seen bits of weight come off and then it bounced back on and more. He wanted to do things the right way, wanted to make like true lifestyle habit changes, and they're only going to happen over a period of time. The other thing that he was also conscious of, like having had the conversation with me, was that what a lot of people can find is when they lose a lot of weight quickly, often that's what leads to more of the loose skin. Sometimes when we're taking stuff that little bit steadier, the body almost has a little bit more ability and time to adjust. So the skin also has an opportunity to firm up with that weight loss happening. Now, loose skin is something that we can't always control. And if somebody has been significantly overweight and they lose a huge amount of weight, sometimes that loose skin is going to be left behind. And sometimes the only real option to remove it is going to be skin removal surgery. Now, we're not at that stage with Ryan. And we're not, we don't know that is going to be the case either. But because we've taken this process pretty steadily as we've gone, that isn't something that we're needing to worry about at this point in time. So from the very beginning, we managed expectations. This wasn't something that was going to happen overnight. It wasn't something that he wasn't suddenly going to lose 100 pounds in 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. It was going to be something that we would take, we wanted to move things at a good pace, of course, but not to the point where, we were literally running him into the ground with low food, with loads of activity. It was always going to be done the right way. So when we first started, Ryan didn't want to be in the gym. Like the gym wasn't a place that he felt comfortable. So I gave him some home workouts to do, just some very simple things, just really to get his body moving. We aimed for a relatively modest amount of steps as well. Again, Ryan had led a pretty sedentary lifestyle up to this point. He works in education, so it involved a lot of sitting down all day. And then there wasn't a huge amount of movement around that either. So we came up with, fairly modest sort of targets to begin with. And we were going to aim for somewhere around the sort of 40-ish thousand steps for the week. Now that might sound high in some ways, but 40,000 steps for the week isn't that many in reality, like 6,000 steps a day on average. The reason I like to use weekly targets for steps is because even if somebody who works a fairly sedentary office desk-based Monday to Friday, who might struggle to get 3,000 or 4,000 steps in a day, so, by the time it's got to the end of Friday, they might be at 15,000, 20,000 steps. If you know that you're then trying to hit 40,000 for the week, it gives you that extra encouragement to get out and move more at the weekend. And you've also likely got much more opportunity to do that as well because you've got a bit more time. So we had 2 to 3 home-based workouts. We had a 40,000 step target for the week. And when it came to calories and macros, so we didn't really at that point have a huge amount of awareness as to exactly what was being eaten. But Ryan knew that for him, this just needed an overhaul. Again, this isn't always the case. There are often situations where the very first step I will take with a person is simply just to ask them to record a food diary for a week. Just let me know every single thing that goes into your body. Then we get an idea of where calories and macros are at, and it might be that we can then tweak and change. Ryan and I discussed this, and he decided that actually for him, he just needed to be told what to eat. Like if it was in front of him and it was planned out, because he enjoys structure, for him that was just going to make life much, much simpler. And that's what we did. So we had a target calorie range of between 2,000 and 2,100 for the day. And I provided him with some very simple, easy to follow meal plans that effectively gave 2 to 3 options for each meal. So, again, Ryan very commonly, breakfast, lunch, dinner, mid-morning snack, mid-afternoon snack, and maybe a sort of evening snack as well. So 3 main meals, 3 snacks. We split those into 2,000 to 2,100 calories. And I gave him a few options for each of those meals, which made life nice and simple so that he wasn't completely overwhelmed by what to do. He wasn't looking at that 2,000 to 2,100 calorie target and thinking, I've got literally no idea what to do with this. We'd come up with a plan. We went backwards and forwards a bit to refine it, which again is one of the things that does need to happen with meal plans a lot of the time. Like it's not about it being this very firm, rigid thing. And I do think that's where a lot of people get meal plans wrong. They think it's one approach, like that there's one meal plan, there's one thing listed, and that's the only thing they can eat. It isn't like that. There are options. And then as we were going, we would then discuss, like, he would come back to me and say, instead of like having chicken for my evening meal, actually, I want to have mince or I want to have fish. And like we discussed how those like quantities and stuff could be tweaked and adjusted to still fit in with an overall target for calories for that meal. But he then was building up his knowledge of like the different foods that he could incorporate. That was creating even more freedom. It was improving his knowledge and awareness around food too. Even though he still wanted to follow the meal plan as a baseline structure, we just came up with like more and more different options that could be used. So for Ryan, the meal plan was really, really important. It provided that initial structure. It gave him focus. It made it very easy to batch cook. It made food shopping simple. He always knew what he was eating when, and everything was in place. Now, like I say, there were things in there. There were times initially where he found life quite difficult, like hunger crept in, the cravings for the things that he usually had, they started to creep in as well. Again, that's really, really natural and normal. But what Ryan was always very good at doing was communicating that with me. And we would discuss it. There might be situations where actually we said, you know what, like, I think let's have something, you know, whatever that thing might have been in the moment. There'd be other times where we'd practice just being a bit more mindful around food. You know, the cravings occurred, sit with it for 10 seconds, ask yourself whether you're actually really hungry and you really want that thing, or whether it's just this fleeting moment that maybe it's a habit thing. You know, maybe you'd got into the habit of every time you went and made yourself a cup of tea, you reached for a handful of biscuits out of the jar. And actually then it's more of a habit thing than actually wanting the biscuits. Because if you just take a step back at that moment, or you move the biscuit somewhere out of sight, out of mind, you know, the habit starts to break and you start to change the way you view things. So we went through this process as well. And what we found was for a decent length of time, that 2,000 to 2,100 calories was enough to lose a significant amount of weight. You know, we ran with that for almost 6 months. And in the space of that 6 months, we saw a really good amount of loss happen. You know, we got to the point where we were 50 pounds down in 6 months, you know, following the calorie and macro approach that we had, like sticking with those, sticking with the meal plan. What Ryan also then had decided that he wanted to do relatively quickly was get into the gym. So from those home workouts that we were doing initially, partly because I think just for a lot of people, having the separate, almost like dedicated fit for purpose space of a gym makes quite a big difference. So Ryan decided, actually, you know what, I want to go into the gym. So we introduced the gym. And again, it was very basic sessions to begin with. It was just simple exercises, a lot of machine-based work, because again, that's what he felt comfortable with. Dripping in a little bit of free weight stuff, maybe a little bit of cable-based work, but essentially just getting Ryan used to moving, getting used to movement patterns, getting used to being in that environment. And over time, that's become a real love. You know, it's somewhere that Ryan, you know, he has gone through phases of really enjoying and not so much. But because he can see and feel the changes that are happening, you know, we're now in the gym 4 times a week. So from where we were at with those initial calories and macros, with the fact that the meal plan was the right thing to do for him, training, cardio, steps, all of those were just progressed gradually over time. You know, to the point where we got to that point of being sort of 50, 60 pounds down, you know, from where we were at the 360, getting down towards the 300 mark. And actually Ryan started to really think about what he wanted to do moving forwards. And that led him to sign up for a charity boxing match, which is a really, really exciting thing because it's something that he'd had in mind for quite a long time. You know, something that he'd been thinking about, something that had been like niggling away, but he just never felt ready, comfortable, confident to do it. But having lost a significant chunk of body weight, you know, 20% of his body weight by now, actually felt much more confident about signing up for that boxing match. So we got signed up for it and everything was working towards that as well. So we were in the gym 2 or 3 times a week. He had boxing practice, a couple of times a week. Everything again continued to ramp up a little bit more because all of that additional exercise was helping to just boost the expenditure. Calories by this point we'd reduced a little bit more. So we brought them down more towards the sort of 1900 mark. Again, not crazy low. It wasn't like we would come in, you know, from 2000, 2100, suddenly having him down at 1500 calories. A very small little adjustment. In addition, obviously, to what he was doing in the gym and what he was doing with the boxing, he still felt good. And this was an important factor for us as well. Like it wasn't, you know, let's push calories down and all of a sudden Ryan was just absolutely exhausted constantly, just not recovering from anything. Everything was going in the right direction. Unfortunately, he did pick up an injury that, within his boxing training, actually, he managed to dislocate his shoulder and also managed to get a little bit of a wrist niggle as well. Tried to work around them, tried to sort of allow them time to recover and very, very much hoped that they would be recovered in time to still have that boxing match. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. The decision was taken that, we don't want to risk this. There's no point getting into a boxing ring, even though it was a charity boxing match. It was still competitive. Ryan still very much was going in there wanting to win that match. So we decided that needed to be postponed, and he's actually signed up for one that's going to happen in the future. but he was very much ready for it. And you know, the desire to push still was very, very much there. Again, we had a slight little wobble on the diet for a week or two where, you know, he started to feel a little bit sorry for himself. Like the boxing that was there is very much the thing that he was focused on. Suddenly that fell away a little bit, but we regrouped. You know, we had lots of conversations in that time. We got signed up for the next one and also started to think about the next goals too, because by this point, you know, we're down to below the 300 pound mark. The charity boxing match was due to happen on the 28th of March, which would have been about 9-10 months into the journey together. And Ryan was down 90 pounds at that point. So, you know, he pushed himself really hard to get down there, looked fantastic for it, was really, really raring to go. So, you know, we know we've got more of that to come. We know that we're going to continue to lose weight, but that was always the little mini target we had, was to get down to that point, and Ryan absolutely smashed through that. The other thing that had sort of changed quite a lot, and this is more of a lifestyle thing. One of the big sort of dreams, ambitions, goals that Ryan and his wife had was to go and do the whole sort of Disney parks, you know, experience in Florida, in Orlando. And actually one of the things that had really put him off doing that is because they'd been to a theme park and he was actually too big to fit in some of the seats. So, you know, almost like the embarrassment of, you know, going to those places, being told that he can't do them because he's too big. Obviously, they're not wanting to like book, you know, the trip of a lifetime if that's going to be the situation. So now, you know, him and his wife are starting to think and plan for that absolute trip of a lifetime, because he's in a situation where he can absolutely embrace every part of that journey. And, you know, by the time that comes around, we're going to be in an even better position. And it's just a really, really amazing thing to be part of. And I, you know, I think like I sort of take this all the way back to the beginning of this video, like envisaging that at the very start, you know, when you're sitting at that 360 pound mark, just the comprehension of like, what am I going to look like? What is life going to look like at 300 pounds, 250 pounds, 220 pounds, 200 pounds, like whatever the end goal becomes. Trying to wrap your head around that at the start is really tough, and it can be quite daunting. And it's why we've also broken it down into chunks. You know, the initial goal from that 360 pounds, like we wanted to just get below 300, wanted to hit that 300 milestone, and that was going to be a big, big factor, ticked off. You know, and we did that relatively quickly. Like I say, we got down to 300 pounds before Christmas. Like before Christmas was the target. Ryan had signed up in June. We wanted to get down to 300 pounds before Christmas, and Ryan did that early December. We were down to 300 pounds. Next targets came in. We wanted to be down at like the 270, 280 pound mark before the charity boxing match. We smashed through that as well. So, you know, like by the time that boxing match was due to come around at the end of March, we were down to 270 pounds. You know, we've continued to see things come off since. There's another 10 pounds down now. We've got the next target in place, which is to get below 100 kilos. So that's to get down towards like 220 pounds, 225 pounds. And, you know, we've given ourselves another target of sort of 2-3 months to achieve that. Breaking it down, that big, big goal, breaking it down into smaller chunks just gives you the ability to sort of push, you know, in those moments. Like, again, if you try and sort of get the start of that journey, 360 pounds, wanting to get down to 220 pounds, you know, 140 pounds to come off, you start to talk about that in like real terms. That might take like 18 months, 2 years to achieve. And all of a sudden, you're going to switch off a bit, because the thought of dieting for 18 months, 2 years solid can just become way too much to even fathom. Whereas, you know, we say, right, we're at June, we're going to give ourselves till Christmas to get to this point, and then we're going to go to March and we get to this point, and by summer it's this point. And the more that you break it down into those chunks, the more of that push and focus and drive that you get hold of. And that massively helps when it comes to, you know, just achieving the longer term goal, but breaking it down and achieving it in smaller chunks. And so just the overall lifestyle that has changed for Ryan is really quite amazing. Like I say, booking trips of a lifetime, wanting to be exercising more, like started park runs now. So, every Saturday, pretty much without fail, going and running 5K at park run. He's just signed up to a local 10K run in his local town. So again, like just wanting those challenges. We're thinking about things like HYROXes, for example, because they're that next thing that we can work towards. So the training plans have been adapted to like bring in more of that approach, that sort of HYROX style, high intensity cardio setup. So all of the time we're adapting and evolving, we're making sure that the goals are focused on, the plans are put in place to do that. And I'm here throughout the entire thing to support him. Sometimes my role is to just be a logical head. When Ryan has that wobble and he's like, I'm just not feeling it at the moment. Like I feel like I'm not going anywhere. My job is to remind him, like, look how far you've come. Look at what you've achieved. Look how much your life has changed. Just take a step back for a second and be really, really appreciative of that. That doesn't mean that we can't want the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, but sometimes just having that appreciation for what we have achieved and how far we have come, we can all be guilty of not doing that. And so sometimes my role as coach is to be that. It's to be the logical head. Other times it is to give a bit of a kick up the arse, in those moments where there were the little wobbles because, the injury had stopped the charity boxing match. Wallow for a day or two, get that out of your system. But then I know your goals are bigger than this. I know you want more. And so the longer that wobble goes on for, the further away from the goal you're getting. And I know that's not going to make you happy ultimately. So just having that very honest conversation and saying, look, I appreciate it's been tough. I appreciate, the situation, circumstances haven't been ideal. But you want more than this. So, let's get refocused. Let's have the opportunity to reset and let's hit that next goal. And that honesty from me and the relationship that we build as, the longer that we work together, we're approaching a year now. Like I say, over £100 down in 11 months. And the goals are still there. The goals are still being worked towards. And Ryan and I speak often, it's really important that we are kept in touch. He lets me know how things are going. I check in and make sure he's okay. I make sure that we're moving in the right direction. Any issues that crop up, we take care of them nice and quickly. This for me is what coaching's about. It's not just, right, here's a training plan, here's some numbers for calories and macros, you go away, crack on. This is a two-way thing. It's a real relationship that we build. It's based on trust. It's based on, all of the things that we've done over this period of time. And that is why Ryan has also achieved an amazing, amazing amount of progress so far. But it's also why I know we've got a lot more to go. So if this hits any kind of notes, if you can relate to like being in a position where you feel a bit stuck, you've got ambitious goals, you're in a situation where you've got a lot of weight to lose and you're just absolutely baffled by how to even start, please do reach out. Like, I'm very, very open to having conversations. It doesn't mean like having a conversation or sending a message with me is an instant sign up. I'm not gonna force your arm or twist your arm into doing that, but I know how much it can help just to have someone on your side who gets it, who understands, who wants the very best for you. And that is what I want. I want the very best for every single person I work with. So I hope this has made sense. I hope you can appreciate, just how much effort has gone in for Ryan. Give him a huge round of applause for everything that he has achieved. And if there's any questions at all on anything that we've done here, anything that I've said, do let me know, because I'm more than happy to chat it through.